Hi, my name is Erika, I'm a knitter from Brazil, and today we're going to have a pattern roundup. Today I have compiled for you 141 true vintage patterns and a few other modernized vintage patterns with lace patterns, mostly lace short sleeve blouses. Why? Well, I have been seeing around a lot of other pattern roundups with lace patterns, lace knitting. However, I see that all of these videos are talking about current trendy patterns, but I also see that many of them are very similar to true vintage old school patterns, and I thought that I should offer you these options too, and I prepared for you several pages of notes here to talk to you about these vintage patterns. Don't you worry, I will not blab about each of the 141 patterns because it would be too much and frankly useless. I have structured the video a little bit differently. We will have a small introductory section about vintage knitting in general, in case you just fell here attracted by the thumbnail but you don't know how to knit vintage, never did it before, never researched about it. Then we're going to have a few patterns that I have highlighted because they use a little thicker yarn, because most of vintage patterns use fingering, light fingering or lace weight, but some don't, because I know some people don't like to knit with very thin yarns, so I have contemplated this for you. Then we're going to go to patterns that can be knitted with cotton and other summer fibers. Last but not least, I will have highlight of a few patterns that I think are good ones to start. I have picked 5 by several criteria, and I will talk a little bit more about them. In the end, I will show to you a few patterns that are modernized options if you don't want to plunge into resizing. So let's dive in. If you have never knitted vintage patterns, if you know very little about knitting vintage patterns, they are just like any other pattern. First and foremost, I want to demystify it a little bit for you, because some people treat it as if it is super hard, and it's not really hard. It's just that we're not used to knit how people knitted back then, and what they had in their hands, we are not used to use the same materials anymore. But if you know how to knit, you know how to knit a vintage pattern, that's it. They have, however, a few characteristics that might be a little bit of an obstacle for people who are just starting, and these are: most are knitted in very thin yarns, most come only in one size, and this size is fairly small. Normally they range from 32 to 36 or 38 inches bust. I think this goes between 80 and 90 something centimeters bust. If you don't fall in this very narrow range of sizing, the first thing that you will have to learn is how to resize a vintage pattern. So I have brought to you, and I will link below some resources that are useful for that. Engineering Knits, if you know her, she released just recently a post about resizing sweaters. I will link it below. There is also a video from the Vintage Knitting Party. She also has an older video about resizing knitting patterns that we will link below. Then you will have a series of posts from a cow by Tasha Can Make That, which the Engineering Knits linked, and I will link too for you. And last year there was a call in the group Vintage Knitting in the Modern World over at Facebook. If you still have Facebook, I recommend you to join this group and another group that I will leave linked there. And it was a call made by Petra Manus named Resize Along, and in the post she goes step by step on how to resize the garment of their choosing. So if you read all of that, you probably will have a good basis on how to do it. If you really want to knit vintage and you love vintage knitting, maybe you could invest in the book Vintage Design Workshop by Geraldine, which is said to be a very good book, and it's theoretical, and it teaches you how to resize, how to pick a yarn, how to pick a pattern, and all of that. These are the materials that I will recommend for you. If you are not very distant from that range of the pattern, you can also pick larger needles and thicker yarn and knit it off gauge, and you will get a slightly larger sweater, and it may fit you. it may be enough for you. These ones that I'm going to talk to you about now use from sport to Aran weight yarn. If you are not a fan of small gauges and thin stuff, maybe start from these ones. Well, our thickest pattern is an Aran weight pattern named Easy and Quick to Knit Jumper in 5 sizes. Another advantage, right? It's from The Land, 22 April 1938, and the gauge is 4 stitches and 4 rows per inch per 2.5 centimeters. So it totals to 16 stitches in 10 centimeters. Then we have 2 worsted weight sweaters. The first one I really like it. I think I'm going to do it someday. It's the style number 711/65 from Bernat number 65, book and knits designed by Misa of Italy. I don't know who this woman was, but there are a few booklets by her, so I think she was a famous stylist from the decade. It's from 1958 and it has elbow sleeves and a scoop neck, very pretty. Then there is the Happy Time sweater from Spinnerin number 116, hand knit time saver fashion of war knit. It's from 1950 exactly. It's a typical 1950s construction in which you knit the front, the back, and you get the cap sleeves from knitting those 2 pieces. Seems like it has little lace, so it might be a good option for starting too. Then we have 4 DK weight patterns. I will leave them for last because 2 of them are in my list that I recommend to begin knitting vintage patterns, vintage sweaters. So let's jump to the sport weights. Sport weight we have 2 as well. One is the Chic Blouse for You to Knit from the Australian Women's Weekly, August 1938. It's for 32 to 34 inch bust. The gauge is 6 stitches per inch. It amounts to 24 stitches per 10 centimeters or 4 inches. It has a cowl neck, a crochet belt, and you can see it's quite chic indeed. I really like this blouse. Then there is the hand knit coupon saver from the Australian Women's Weekly too. It's from October 1942. When you hear about coupon saver, you already know this is from the Second World War. And they use here color work and they use mesh, probably both wanting to save yarn. It's a quite out there pattern, but maybe it's the taste of someone. If I were to knit this, I will probably skip the color work and make it only the lace and everything and probably make a different neckline. Or if I were to make the color work, probably I would pick a neutral for either the top part or the body part. And then we have the DK patterns. One of them is the short sleeve jumper in a pretty stitch from the Newcastle Sun, 1st March 1938. Then we have 2 others. One of them is the square yoke blouse from Stitchcraft. It's from 1935, I think. And the other is the lace yoke blouse from Bernhard Ullmann, volume 7, New Trends in Hand Knit Sweaters. It's from 1940 exactly. You have 36 projects of this pattern over at Ravelry, so there is a lot of reading material for you to support your own knitting. And it's interesting to start because it has lace just on top. Most of the pattern is a stockinette pattern. The lace is here basically. So if you have never knitted lace, this one is a good one. However, I think from when I read some of the projects a while back that there are some problems in the pattern writing. So maybe you will want to or sit this out or just guide yourself by the project to figure the problem and put it aside. Now, since we are going to talk about knitting vintage with summer fibers, we have to talk a little bit about the characteristic of vintage patterns and the characteristic of summer fibers. They don't always match because vintage patterns, most of them need the elasticity of wool to give that vintage fit, which is usually 0 ease or negative ease even. Today's patterns are mostly oversized, so if you pick an oversized sweater and knit it with cotton, even if the cotton sags, you will still have a product that is not so far away from what it was supposed to fit like. But if you have a pattern that has negative ease, well, you will pull it through your head to dress it. The smallest section of your waist will go through your shoulders and it will stretch and it won't go back, because summer fibers, cotton, linen, silk and all of this, they don't have elasticity. They have a beautiful drape and they have beautiful stitch definition, and this makes them good for lace, but the stretch makes them bad for fitted garments. So what we have to do to conciliate those things? Well, first, if you can find cotton or linen blends with elastic fiber, which may be merino, another wool, or even acrylic. I have knitted a few garments with cotton acrylic blends and they combine very well the two characteristics. They tend to be a little warmer, so maybe if you live in a very hot place or where your summers get very hot or anything, maybe this won't be the best choice, but one option is to pick a summer fiber with a elastic yarn combined. I have two more solutions. One of them is to go for buttoned or open garments like this. I decided to knit this one in cotton because I won't need to dress it pulling it over my head. I can unbutton it and button it back. So the stretch that I would submit my garment to won't happen. It still can grow too much with washing and this kind of thing. It can have its borders not so crisp as they would be with wool. However, for the borders, we can have other solutions. Sometimes you can crochet the finishings, make a slip stitch border in your sleeve or in the neckline or the waistband where you want to prevent it from stretching, because crochet won't stretch as much as knitting. So many patterns that used cotton back then have crochet finishes because of that. So if you want to knit vintage with summer fibers, that's a good idea to learn the very basics of crochet. You don't have to learn much, just maybe to make slip stitches and that kind of thing. And another situation is to use elastic. In patterns that I have knitted or crocheted, I have used elastic thread in the neckline, in the armholes to keep it streamlined, and in the waist I have used acto elastic. I have knitted over it and it gives me the fitted look I wanted and it solves the problem. So we're going now to see the acto vintage patterns that are meant to be knit with cotton. We have two that are meant to be knitted with fingering weight cotton. The first is the Jocelyn sweater for a sporty life, which was published in the Australian Women's Magazine in March 1941. And it is meant for a yarn that was actually a blend, a wool cotton blend, so you can see that it's more fitted and everything. It was designed for a 34-inch bust and it uses a 3.25mm needles. Then we have the lace cotton blouse for the spring, which is also from the Australian Women's Weekly, August 1950. You will notice that most of our cotton patterns are from the 30s and the 50s. It's very rare that they used cotton in the 40s. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't have cotton in the market because of the war. The lace cotton blouse for the spring is meant for a 42-inch bust. It's one of our largest patterns today, and this one used actual cotton. I started with the fingering weight, however, most of the old patterns do not use fingering weights. They use cotton thread, which is this very thin yarn, like this one. See, super thin, that today is used mostly for crochet. They have in the past some patterns to knit with them. However, there is another degree of difficulty because thread doesn't come only in one size. If you know notating or if you are an embroiderer, a sewist, you probably know thread a little better than knitters. Threads can come in a range of sizes, from the thickest, which are thread number 5, to the thinnest, which is I think number 8. The higher the number of the thread, the thinner the yarn, and the lesser the text size, which is one measure of thickness of the yarn, of density of the yarn. The higher the number, the denser the yarn. Bulky weight tends to have very high. It correlates grams and meters of a given thread or yarn, how many grams you can have in 1 kilometer and this kind of thing. So I have compiled here some patterns for thread size 5, thread size 10, which is the one I have, thread size 20, which is thinner, and thread size 8, which is between 5 and 10, closer to 10, very similar. Well, for thread size 5, which is the thickest, we have the knitted lace blouse number 138, which is from Spool Cotton Company. You will find in the internet a lot of cotton patterns from this company because they were selling cotton, Spool Cotton, right? It is a brand that belonged to JP Coats & Clark, which exists to this day as coats, and in Brazil they have the linhas correntes. They had this knitted lace blouse. It's from the booklet number 62, Fashions of Today. It has eyelets, surface crochet. It's a notably hard pattern. I have heard from the projects there, which I read, it's said to be hard, and it's quite short in the original design, and it uses thicker yarn with a kind of a cable texture that was famous for its quality back then. It was composed of 6 cords and it was named Cordonnet. There is still DMC Cordonnet Special 5, and also in Brazil you can knit it with Esterlina 5. It's a thread, the text is 230, and it's a Pima cotton, so it's high quality. Then the next one will be thread size 8, which you can knit in Brazil with Esterlina number 8. The text is 140 in this case. The only one is A Blouse for a Song from Sunday Mail from 27 August 1950. It's interesting because it has an author there, and it's by Margaret Sherman, and it uses crochet finishes. Then we go to the thread number 10, which has a little more patterns and the ones that I can pick. In Brazil you could knit it with Penguin 1000, which is this one, and you can knit it also with Clear. So we have the Flattery cardigan number 1148. It's from 1938, from the Spool Cotton Company booklet number 117, colors and blouses. Then we have the lacy knitted striped blouse number 11 from 1934, from also the Spool Cotton Company booklet number 35, handmade sportswear. Then we have the cotton lace jumper from May 1954. It's from the newspaper The Land. It uses botanical lace. The other two that I showed, they are made with vertical eyelet sections. I think these are simpler, but this uses a botanical lace motifs all over. And if you're going to knit this, pay attention to the projects that are there, because one of them corrects one mistake from the pattern. Then there is the ladies blouse number 11 from 1936. It's from the knitting book by Elizabeth King, which is part of a series named the Leisure Little League. This is the number 24 of the collection. The book, and I think the person that shared it, provide also different lace that can be replaced with the main pattern that they originally knitted the top in. So you just swap the lace. With this pattern you can knit various vintage lace blouses. In this case, if you're going to knit it, there are forum posts on Ravelry that you can read and people talk about it. This, by the way, is always a tip for knitting vintage. Read the other projects, read the blog posts, read the forum posts, and then you can have the help you need in any of them. Then we go to thread size number 20, which is the thinnest that we have found. And here we have 3 patterns. One is the lace evening blouse from the Australian Woman's Weekly from 1957. It uses a thread that is still sold today in Brazil, by the way. It's the linha Mercer para crochet, text 130. We also have here the afternoon jumper from 1945. It's from the Modern Knitting Illustrated book by Janet Coster and Margaret Murray. You will recognize this one if you follow the channel, because I started knitting, I tried to knit it. However, I noticed that I had the wrong thread size, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't move forward with this. But they use the thread size number 20 for the black body, and they use thread size number 40, which is the thinnest, for the crochet finishes, which are the lace. I think the body doesn't have lace actually. It's not knitted lace in this case, but I still wanted to place it here because I wanted to give you a good variety of lace. In the bundle you will find all over lace. You will have lace panels only here in the yoke, lace panels across the body. You will have a botanical lace, feather and fan, eyelets only, mesh, dropped stitches, all kinds of lace that you can find in current patterns you will find there too. Then the third and last pattern from this thread session is the cotton blouse from the Western Mail 6 March 1962. You can find all of these on Trove. It has both knitted lace and crocheted lace, so it's challenging but very, very cute. Cotton, however, is not the only summer fiber, so we have a few blends here. One of them is a pattern that asks for light fingering or lace weight, which is the Gleam Sweater from Sultana number S20 Fashions and Accessories. It's a booklet from 1950 and it uses the yarn Sultana Beauty Glow, which I also have found online. I will link it below if someone wants to buy it. I have nothing to do with the seller. This yarn was a novelty yarn, sorta, and it had 73% cotton, 18% metal and 9% rayon. So it was supposed to be a fancy night cardigan, kinda. It's buttoned. See, remember when I said buttoned, not stretching? They knew about it back then. So there are also two that use blends of wool and rayon, which was a brand new fiber in the 30s and they were putting it into the stuff. So one of them is the Dartmoor from Minerva Volume 30 style book. It's from 1933 and it's a pattern based on dropped stitches, which was very on trend back then. It uses lace weight yarn and no gauge is given in this pattern, so the person that knitted it figured out her own gauge. You can consult the material there, and I think more people have knitted all over the internet. You can search for the Dartmoor pattern and maybe find more advice, but proceed with caution. Not impossible, but a challenge. And then there is the lace sweater in Glow Crinkle from the Handicrafter Volume 4, number 5, from 1932-1933. It's for 34 to 36 inch bust. It's knitted in the round, that's special, that's why I decided to include it in the pattern roundup, and uses 3.5mm needles, which is kind of basic for today, and fingering weight yarn. So these are our options. Let's go to the buttoned options, which are not meant for cotton or summer fibers, but you can still knit them with this. So in the buttoned section, I have compiled a few boleros, some cardigans, short-sleeved cardigans or buttoned blouses, and some bed jackets, because they were knitted in the past for laying and lounging in your bed before sleep, but they are very nice and they could be worn pretty much easily as outerwear today. So I will give you rapid fire in this, because I haven't written much about them, just the names, and I will show them in the screen for you. We have the Lacy Bolero from Bestway 856. We have Vogue from 47. We have the Liza Pretty Partners cardigan from the Australian Women's Weekly, 11 March 1963. It's very, very current. It has even, I think, a positive is this one. Then there is the attractive fancy knit bed jacket from the Argus, Tuesday, 26 April 1949. Then the lace knit blouse from Needlework Illustrated, number 215 from 1952. And this one is very current in its appearance, don't you think? It could have been released by the Creabea, I think. Then there is the Alice Blue lace jumper, also from the Australian Women's Weekly, March 1942. Then the spring green jumper from the Australasian, 20 June 1936. It is for a 36-inch bust and it clearly has a little bit more ease built in the design, so some people might be more comfortable with this one. Then there is the Daffodil from Pattons and Baldwin's Volume 5 style from 1939. Then for a spring day from the Australian Women's Weekly, 5 September 1942. The jumper with different neckline from the Sydney Morning Herald, November 1937. Then there is the Sweet Little Blouse from the Australian Women's Weekly of 23 March 1946. Then the delightful button to the neck jumper from South Coast Times and Wollongong Argus, 14 June 1964. The Style 2601 from Bear Brand Volume 54, Hand Knit Cardigans. It's a booklet from 1950 7. It's probably one of those patterns that have options for short and long sleeves, but the sample has short sleeves and it comes in 3 sizes, so a little bit of an advancement. Then there is the mannish blouse worn abroad from the Sydney Morning Herald, 5 January 1937, very akin to that era, a little bit of mannish fashion. Then there is a lacy bed jacket from the Sydney Morning Herald, 22 July 1954, the bedtime jacket from the Australian Women's Weekly, 30 March 1940, and then there is this larger one, a summer jacket in lacy stitch from the Newcastle Sun, 28 December 1937. From all the patterns that I have compiled in the bundle, I decided to pick 5 that I would recommend if you have never knitted vintage, if you have never knitted lace, if you want to start by something. Maybe these are good options. Why? Because most of them have more projects that people have already knitted, so you can read the notes, and in some you can even learn how to knit them in the round, make modifications and all that jazz. But also there are other characteristics that make them interesting to start. I have already talked about the lace yoke blouse, right? I talked about it in our decay weight section. Then there is the squared yoke blouse from Stitchcraft number 32, May 1935. You can find the pattern in the blog Work for Idle Hands, and the owner of the blog knitted it, so you can find her exposing her version of the pattern too. From the patterns that are there on Ravelry, I really love the teal version that is in the pattern page. And this pattern is interesting. Why? Because the front and back are identical, and you don't make shaping with increases and decreases. If you have some trouble with that, you make shaping changing the sizes of needles. So you will need to have some needles because they use 3.25, 3.75 and 4 meter needles. So 4 sets to create the shape, to make it smaller at the waist and larger in the other parts, and to change from the body to the neckline, which is a mitered neckline. This one fits a 34-inch bust, and it uses quite little yarn. It uses 354 to 400 meters of decay weight yarn. It has flutter sleeves that, from what I heard, were knitted only like little straps that you then attach and then create the flutter. You place some buttons here to decorate it, and you also can find a few versions with mods for larger sizes, especially 38-inch bust to I think 49-inch bust. There are several versions by user Sumoon, and she used different stitch counts in each of them, so you can base yourself on her versions to create your own. Then the other pattern that I also think would be a good start is your Victory Jumper. This one. It's from the Home Notes Journal 1945, and it has 336 projects on Ravelry. That's why I think this is a good one for you to start, because many people needed it. You can see so many suggestions, so many modifications, so many different sizes. Vintage knitters, when they post to Ravelry, which they not always do, but when they do, they tend to be quite generous in their writing, in their numbers, in their notes, so you can use as reference. It's very nice because you can sometimes copy the stitch count. And there are blog posts and there are forum posts. You have support to knit this one. However, I think the focus of this pattern wasn't at the lace. It mixes lace and color work. So I see this pattern more like a color work pattern, but it has lace eyelet rows dividing it vertically. So quite nice. You can start by this one. Then we have the attractive lightweight jumper from the Sunday Times, 18 October 1936. Why I recommend this one? It also has 9 projects for you to base yourself. It demands little meterage, and although it uses lace weight, you use again different needles to create the lace. You use I think a 3.5 and a 5. It is a very open pattern, so you probably will need some combination or a camisole underneath, but it's probably very fresh, and it's really cute. See those versions, very cute. Although read the projects, because people have talked about issues of each pattern in the project. Last but not least, we have the lace jumper in a feather stitch from Best Way 275, or you also can find it in the Best Way A 275. I consider the square yoked blouse a easy pattern, and this I would consider it a medium pattern. At least 3 people have knitted from the cast on to the underarm in the round. So if you don't really love to knit flat, you can do that in the round quite easily. I have picked this one because I know that Feather and Fan is an easy lace stitch because I have knitted it, and I also know it's very stretchy. They say in the pattern that it goes up to a 38-inch bust with the numbers that the pattern give, and apparently some people had to remove stitch counts to get a better fit in a 32-inch bust, because otherwise it would be too open and wouldn't sit like a nice vintage jumper. And from this pattern I have picked a quote that I will leave here for you because it really moved me, and I totally understand what she's talking about. Vintage patterns do have this power. They make us feel powerful and feminine, and well, for people who want to feel feminine, but whatever, without making it problematic. I found the affirmation touching, so I would like to share with you to motivate you to knit vintage sweaters. This one has option for long and short sleeves. It's closed with buttons here in the back neck. The meterage asked for is 600 to 700 meters of lace weight yarn. One repeat is supposed to measure 5 centimeters, and someone modified this pattern to open the neckline as a handle and to have the long sleeves finish in a wavy pattern without ribbon here, without ribbon here. It looks very modern, looks like a knitting for olive blouse. I forgot the name, but this one. If you take advantage of the vintage patterns, you can make a lot with them and make them suit your needs exactly. Well, almost all of my patterns today were free patterns, but I have a bonus section for people who say, Erika, I don't want to know how to resize. I don't want to learn, this is too much for my head right now, I don't have the mindset. Well, I didn't forget you. I have searched for some patterns that were already resized for you. I have added some in the bundle. These two are free, which are from Retrocloud, the Budleia blouse and the lace slip-on, I think. These two, but we have some from the book Sweater Girls and others, but I think I have to call your attention to the ones by Susan Crawford, which are resized to a quite wide size range. So you have, for example, one that she released very recently, this one. There is It Cannot Fail to Please, there is this blouse with frills, there is Tasha, there is Jan. So you have a lot of patterns which you can get by buying her books, or not all of them, but some you can get via Ravelry as individual patterns. So if you want to knit those patterns but you don't want to go through the trouble of resizing, go to Susan Crawford and others that I have listed here, and you can also go to the group The Vintage Database over at Ravelry, which is a group I created to fill up Ravelry with vintage pattern information. And then the bundles section, you have a full folder with modernized and resized patterns. You have two actually. You have the modernized and resized, and you also have the vintage inspired, which are not proper vintage patterns, but they have a vintage look about them, which may be what you want to. If you don't want to knit flat, you don't want to knit none of those vintage techniques, you want to knit top down in the round or bottom up in the round, you can find there in that bundle the modern patterns with vintage inspiration. So go check that. I will leave the group linked below, but our bundle is this one, Knit Yourself a Vintage Lace. And what I want to see after this pattern roundup is you knitting a vintage lace top for yourself. So if you need something from this bundle, please leave the link below. Well, maybe not the link, but then write your Ravelry user and the name of your pattern, of your project, or your Instagram. I will check it out because it would be so nice to see this giving fruits and being useful for someone, honestly. You can also add me on Ravelry and message me there, or add me at Instagram and show me your post or anything. Just get in touch and show that it was useful for you. I think that's it for today, folks. I didn't forget my medieval pattern roundup, it's coming. And the other ones too, the videos about seasonal color and knitting, style essences and knitting, and all the other ones that I mentioned, they are coming in their due time. By now, be happy, be healthy, happy knitting, and I see you in the next one. Bye bye!